together. So let's get to it with our excellent panel. I'll introduce our first panelist, Dr. David A. Prentice. He is Vice President and Research Director for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. He is also Adjunct Professor of Molecular Genetics at the John Paul II Institute, the Catholic University of America, and Advisory Board Chair, I heard that woo, Advisory Board Chair for the Midwest Stem Cell Therapy Center, a unique, comprehensive stem cell center in Kansas that he was instrumental in creating. Previously, he served at the Family Research Council, and prior to that, spent almost 20 years as Professor of Life Sciences at Indiana State University, and Adjunct Professor of Medical and Molecular Genetics, Indiana University School of Medicine. Dr. Prentice's research interests encompass various aspects of cell growth control, cell and developmental biology. One major focus is adult stem cells. He is an internationally recognized expert on stem cell research and bioethics and has provided scientific testimony before the U.S. Congress and numerous state legislatures, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, the President's Council on Bioethics, European Parliament, British Parliament, Canadian Parliament, Australian Parliament, German Bundestag, French Senate, Swedish Parliament, the United Nations, and the Vatican. I could continue to go on and on about his expertise, but I think his presentation is going to speak for itself. Dr. Prentice, I want to welcome you up now.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you all for being here. Let's jump into this because we want to emphasize the theme of the March for Life this year. Unique from day one, pro-life is pro-science. Now, and as you could probably gather, I am a geek. I'm definitely a scientist, but the science is incontrovertible. For example, here is from one of the two leading scientific journals in the world, Nature. Look at the title, Your Destiny from Day One. As you go into that article, they talk about how your body plan was even set up back from the very beginning, when you became a one-celled human being, an embryo, an organism. You were a new genetically distinct human organism from the beginning. And here are various more of these very geeky sorts of definitions of the beginning of life. The idea being that these are from authorities in medicine, in embryology. Ora Hilly, who has that first quote there, is the leading embryologist in the world, and decades ago set up what are called the Carnegie stages, and we'll come back to those in a minute, but they're the consensus scientific facts about early stages of human life. The idea that your prenatal age started at fertilization. That was the beginning when you became a new genetically distinct human organism. Now you've probably seen all those maps like in the malls where you've got the little dot and it says you are here. Well, this is a map. You started here. You started over there on the left. The egg is ovulated from the ovary and is fertilized actually outside of the womb in what's called the fallopian tube. Your life as a new genetically distinct human organism started there. You kept growing and dividing, more cells being added as you worked your way down into the uterine cavity, and then it's like there's a graduation exercise. Then you can implant into the uterine wall. But it's a matter of here's just another stage in your unique life as an organism. So you started here as a single-celled embryo, 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16, it goes on and on and on. You're now ready to graduate. You're now ready to implant into the uterine wall. And what are you doing when you do that? Well, you're looking for more nutrition, for oxygen. You're trying to get in contact now, more intimate contact with mom, and she is supplying that nutrition that helps you continue to grow and divide. But frankly, implantation in the uterine wall is not necessarily a big deal. There are, unfortunately, scientists who are growing human embryos outside the womb, in the laboratory, and beyond that 7-day mark of your graduation to implant, showing that there's nothing particularly unique about implantation that made you now a new human organism. It's also not anything special about being a single cell. It's special about being an organism. You might have heard about this cell line called HeLa cells. They're a cancer cell line that was started first back in the 1950s. But you can take one of those HeLa cells, put it into a dish, and you're not going to get a full human being. You're going to get more HeLa cells. If you put one of those cells into the womb, you'll just get more HeLa cells. They are not an organism. They are not an embryo. And again, some more sort of scientific definitions. We use that term embryo for your first 8 weeks of life. And then, again, you've got a graduation exercise where we call you something different. We call you a fetus. But you are still a unique human organism all the way along. And then there are various markers along the way as we continue to grow and develop. So after about 3 weeks, your heart starts to beat and pump your own blood throughout the body. As you continue to grow and develop, brain waves actually start, usually by about 45 days after fertilization. You continue to grow and divide, and actually by about 8 to 10 weeks, pretty much all of your organs and systems, at least the rudimentary forms, are already in place. Think about that. That's less than 3 months to actually have all of your organs already kind of laid down. And then you go on and grow and specialize and grow in size and so on. Not too long after that time, you actually start to develop your fingerprints and your fingernails. So it's a continual process of you as an organism. Now, here are those Carnegie stages I mentioned. And this is really deep down in geekdom. But Carnegie stages are the way scientists, embryologists in particular, designate where you are on your journey in life. You started, like we showed before, as that single-celled organism. You continue to grow and divide and specialize and so on until after about 8 weeks, you actually start to look something like you look now. You actually have limbs and other sorts of features that resemble. But all the way along, you were an organism. You weren't just this disorganized clump of cells. You were a unique human being. After a few more weeks, 18 weeks, 20 weeks, you start to look like that. You look very familiar at that point. In fact, as science advances, you are now able to even survive outside of the womb. These very preterm babies are living and surviving what we sometimes hear referred to as viability at younger and younger ages, even at 20 weeks, at which point you can, by the way, experience pain. The nerve tracts and those connections to certain parts of the brain are already present. You react. But let me introduce you to Micah Pickering, who was born at 20 weeks and survived. It was nip and tuck, but medical science actually trying to help this young human being now survive. And Micah now, as you can tell, is a healthy young man out climbing trees and causing all sorts of good trouble. We're starting to do even fetal surgery at these stages of life, these early stages of your life as a human being, a human organism. You're probably familiar with this picture, little Samuel Armas reaching outside of the womb and grabbing the doctor's finger. He was actually operated on a couple of weeks before that time period when Micah was born, about 18, 19 weeks. His surgery repaired his problem that he had. He was born a nice, healthy young man. There are now thousands of these fetal surgeries being done, treating that young individual as a patient. And we're seeing more and more hospitals around the country consider that patient within the patient, or consider the fetus as a patient. Not even just in terms of surgeries, but in terms of other types of modern scientific treatments. The womb itself, in fact, is not necessarily special anymore in terms of your survival as that young human organism. There are implications for development of what are called artificial wombs, where you see here in the picture a lamb who was delivered prematurely and then placed into this artificial womb simply to give this little being a chance to develop more, to develop their lungs and other sorts of organs so they could eventually survive outside of whatever this nurturing environment is. But all of this has to do with continue to nurture, continue to develop as a human being, a unique, genetically distinct organism. I also like to show this picture. These very young embryos, in some cases, have been adopted by other parents. And this is from a House of Representatives hearing back in 2001. Lucinda had finished her testimony, and she held up this picture you can see. Under the microscope were these little embryos. And then John stood up behind her with Luke and Mark in his arms. Same individuals, but just a few months older. And I think it makes that connection. Still a unique human being, unique human organisms. When we start to talk about stem cells and using those embryos as raw material, there are alternatives. And one was developed by Dr. Shinya Yamanaka. He called them induced pluripotent stem cells, iPS cells. They have the same sorts of characteristics that we see with embryonic stem cells, but you don't have to destroy a young human life to get them. You can take a skin cell or almost any cell and turn them into these specialized types of stem cells for laboratory experiments. And when he was asked, why'd you even come up with this? Where'd you get this idea? He said, I went to a friend's lab, I looked through the microscope at an embryo under the microscope, and I said, there's such a small difference between this embryo and my daughter's. And we can't keep destroying embryos for research. There must be another way. And he did come up with this other way, and frankly, he earned the Nobel Prize for doing it. It's a life-affirming type of research. There are also adult stem cells. This is an area near and dear to my heart because this is an area where we're seeing the gold standard of stem cells. Almost 2 million people around the globe now being treated with this alternative, this life-affirming rather than life-destroying type of research. You can get adult stem cells from almost any tissue. You're probably familiar with bone marrow, but umbilical cord blood, the solid part of the umbilical cord, my favorite, liposuctioned fat because I can be a donor. But these are the cells that are treating people for dozens of conditions. Just a couple of quick examples. Sickle cell anemia, life-threatening disease that can now be treated, and in fact the medical journals even say cured. They use that C word, but it's with adult stem cells. And as I mentioned, even treating young babies in the womb, even before they would have reached Micah Pickering's age, so at 18, 19, even 17 weeks, with adult stem cells. In this case, in the picture, the little baby was treated for a genetic condition called thalassemia. I'd encourage you to go to this website, stemcellresearchfacts.org. What we've tried to do is put some of these patients' stories up there so that you can learn more about this life-affirming research versus the life-destroying research. And I appeal to you to pass this on as well. Very often the mainstream media are not our friends in terms of getting the truth out there. And we need you to be speaking that truth into our culture. Thank you.
That was wonderful. How insightful. I cannot wait to follow up with more questions, but we're going to move on to our next presentation with our next panelist. Dr. Grazie Christie is a policy advisor for the Catholic Association. Dr. Grazie Christie grew up in Guadalajara, Mexico, coming to the United States at the age of 11. She is a graduate of Columbia University and the University of Miami School of Medicine. As a Hispanic, she brings a special focus on social issues that affect the growing Latino population, such as the state of the family and the real needs of the poor and the marginalized. As a practicing radiologist and mother of 5, she is able to address complex subjects relating to government health policy and its true impact on the people it purports to help. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, USA Today, CNN.com, National Review, FoxNews.com, U.S. News and World Report, and the New York Times, among others. She has appeared on CNN, Telemundo, Fox News, C-SPAN, and EWTN. Dr. Christie also works with pregnancy resource centers. She has a lot of insight she can share with us now. Dr. Christie.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prentice, for starting us off with a lot of geekiness. I'm going to continue. I'm also a scientist, but I'm a different kind of scientist. I'm a physician. And a physician is somebody who applies science to the diagnosis and treatment of disease. The medical arts are ancient, and as long as there have been human beings on the earth, there have been other human beings dedicating their lives to getting them through those illnesses and traumas that are a normal part of human life that none of us can avoid. And as long as healers and midwives and physicians and nurses have existed, medical science has been at the service of life, prolonging it and enhancing it. So one of the loveliest, most mysterious and dangerous parts of human existence is childbirth. Every human being, all of us here, have come into the world in the exact same way, through our mothers. Inside our mothers nurture us and protect us, of course with the very early assistance of our dads, very momentarily. And centuries and centuries have gone on. Through the centuries, the whole process was shrouded in complete mystery. We knew that the act of love was also an act of creation, and that 10 months later, 9.5 months later, a baby would miraculously appear. But what did it all mean? And when was that moment when life entered the new child, that new human being? People used to think it was what they call quickening. When a mother was able to feel the movements of her child, they said, that's when life begins, right? So anyway, over history, in Western civilization, an entire system of medical ethics grew up as medicine grew up, and this was something that we call Hippocratic medicine. And Hippocratic medicine is the idea that everything in medicine should be fully informed with lofty ideals, with the highest nobility of help for somebody. You have to not just help somebody, but help them in the noblest way. And for instance, refraining from doing harm, refraining from poisoning people, treating every sick person equally regardless of their class, their position in society, their race, or their sex. There was always, throughout these ages in Western medicine, a prohibition against abortion and a revulsion for the process. So here's a small quote from the Hippocratic Oath, which to this day many medical students recite upon their graduation, and they swear to uphold. I will use treatment to help the sick according to my ability and judgment, but never with a view to injury and wrongdoing. Neither will I administer a poison to anybody when asked to do so, nor will I suggest such a course. Similarly, I will not give to a woman a pessary to cause abortion, but I will keep pure and holy both my life and my art. Those words to me are so moving, pure and holy. I like to think of everything that I do professionally to be pure and holy. So, over the years, as medical science grew up, childbirth became safer, and thank God, and maternal and fetal morbidity and mortality continued to go down. And these days we're very amazed when a woman goes to deliver at the hospital and we don't get a great outcome on both sides, right? We always expect a healthy live baby and a healthy live mom at the end of the birth process. So this picture is a baby being brought out of the womb through a C-section. That's a very alive child being shepherded into the world through the C-section, which a procedure that has saved many, many millions of women's lives and also children's lives. But at the same time that childbirth, all the science around pregnancy and childbirth and perinatal medicine was developing, the science of abortion was also developing. And it became safer for the mother physically, although not safer, of course, for the baby, and not safer for the mothers and fathers' hearts, their souls, their consciences, and their future after abortion. So we all know, which is why we're here, that in 1973, abortion was legalized, and we were told that this was a result of an advance in science, because all these different scientific advances that had been made in the 50s and 60s had liberated us. They had the ability to improve our lives, and all these ancient cultural norms and that prohibited us from ending the lives of our children were just social conventions that science had allowed us to supersede. But for us to believe what the pro-abortion movement tells us about early human life, the flourishing of women, the meaning of it all, and the decency of our culture requires that we be suffering from blindness, from deafness, and it requires the silencing of the truth. So, how does science open our eyes? We were told, and we're still being told to this late date, that those are not young human beings. They are a clump of cells. They've been called polyps. They're called parasites. They're called the products of conception. That's the term that they use in abortion centers. These are products of conception. And this is a terrible miscarriage of science, actually, as Dr. Prentice explained to us. And it turns some doctors into contract killers. But modern science has revealed the truth. So what is growing in the uterus? Audience, what is growing in the uterus? Thank you. Rhymes with maybe. That was a big clue. So now we know it because we see it. There's no more mysteries involved. So fetal ultrasound was the game changer. In 1973, the same date of Roe v. Wade, very interestingly, and I think this is providential, that at the same time, fetal ultrasound was coming into its own and was starting to be used on a routine basis. So here on one side is the 1973 version of the fetal ultrasound, and there's 2018, what we would recognize as fetal ultrasound. So that's what they look like now. The detail is stunning. Here's a little hand. You can see the radius, the bone of the bone of the forearm, the little metacarpals and the phalanges. The long bone on the top is a femur. We have the fat little thigh and the little knee. We have little toes that are waiting to be born so we can tickle them. Here we have the pretty little profile. We can already see the features that we recognize in ourselves in the mirror and in our husbands when we see these pictures. The little ear, the perfectly formed ear, the pretty face, and that mouth that is so important to the baby before birth and after birth. So this is a baby sucking his thumb, and that's amazing, right? That a baby can suck his thumb. Not so amazing. A baby in the womb and outside the womb is not that different. That was supposed to be a video, by the way, of the baby sucking. Anyway, it was in the early 90s that science advanced again, and we got the transvaginal ultrasound. The transvaginal ultrasound made it possible for us to see, all of us to see, the development of the embryo. The embryo is the baby before 8 weeks, as Dr. Prentice told us. And we're able to see the very obvious humanity and the liveliness of a very young human. So this little guy is only 6 weeks old from conception. He's about the size of a blueberry. And you can see his limbs in his head and his tummy. And he has something very important that helps us. Where's my heartbeat? Oh, it was so dramatic. Supposed to be. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you. That's okay. I don't know if you're all. To me, that is the most beautiful sound in the world. when I sit in the room, in the examining room with my patients, I do a lot of fetal ultrasound. I don't know if we mentioned that. That moment when that sound, I always turn it up really high, like that. When that sound fills the examining room, oh, you should see the people's faces, the mom and the dad's faces, sometimes the aunts and the sisters and the cousins, and because I'm in Latin America, the capital of Latin America. I'm in Miami, so people like travel in droves. And the faces that shine when they hear that sound, that's the sound of life. And we're talking about we're very early pregnancies. The mom just missed her period. She just thinks she's pregnant, and there it is, that beautiful sound. It's a big moment. So anyway, that's the way that science opens our ears to life. So what science is doing for us is that it's illuminating and clarifying the details so that we can speak the truth with confidence. We have the truth, we can speak it with confidence. We can take all that science, all those thousands of years of science, of development in all these fields, and we can speak with a lot of confidence about what's going on. Dr. Prentice covered a few of these things in his talk, the different stages at which the baby in his development achieves these milestones, and the heart beating on its own, brain activity which is detectable, the baby can sigh and stretch and move her head, opens the mouth, swallows, drinks the amniotic fluid, sucks the thumb. And week 13, the baby's sensitive to touch. We know this because when we do fetal surgeries, or anytime you invade the womb, the baby jumps away. And we know the baby can't tell us he's feeling pain, but we know what pain looks like. Pain on monitors, pain is a rapid heartbeat. The heartbeat goes up. There's distress in the womb when these things happen. I'm missing... Oh, this is supposed to be a video. Can you make it go? Okay, so science keeps advancing. Science always keeps advancing. And what we're seeing now, which is so fabulous, is MRI. And MRI of the baby in the womb is absolutely life-changing, I think, for the pro-life movement, and absolutely destructive for the pro-abortion movement. Because the stunning detail, please run the video. No, it's not gonna happen. The video is so amazing. The video even has MRI of the baby emerging from the mother. It's really a stunning detail. Maybe we can run it later. But anyway, MRI is another advancement. So close, we're so close. MRI is another wonderful advancement where science is going to illuminate us and clarify things for us and just fill us with excitement to be protectors of the vulnerable and to have, all our hearts in it. I mean, I know I'm speaking to the choir. All our hearts are in it. But this is going to convert more people and more people to our cause. So I thank you very much.
Wow, how powerful were those images? This image alone, even though the video is not playing, it's so powerful, and that heartbeat. Thank you, Dr. Christie. Thank you. We're going to continue on now with our next presenter, Rick Smith. Rick Smith is the founder and president of Hope Story, a nonprofit that promotes the beauty and value of all human life by providing hope and encouragement to families whose child has just received a Down syndrome diagnosis. For over 7 years, Rick has created awareness about raising a child with Down syndrome worldwide via his blog and social media channels. Rick's passion about helping people use their story to help make a difference in the lives of others. He lives in Dallas, Texas with his wife of over a decade, Abby, and his 3 children, Noah, Jackson, and Cohen. Rick, can you share with us your hope story and presentation?
Well, what an honor to be here. When I was a kid, we would watch Sesame Street, and they'd put up like 3 apples and a clown, and they would say, "Can you guess which one is not like the others?" That's how I feel right now, literally. So I don't even know how they'll let anybody in here. So listen, I want to tell you a little bit about our story. And so here we go. So this is our son right here. His name is Noah. You'll see him on the next slide here. It's coming. He's coming. You guys got it? There he is. This is our son Noah. And we were surprised to learn about 3 hours after his birth. I have the clicker, so that was my bad. We were surprised to learn about 3 hours after his birth that he was born with Down syndrome. And so, you know, the Bible tells us that God knitted this little boy together in his mother's womb, that God knew exactly. I was surprised. My wife was surprised, but God certainly wasn't surprised when this little boy came out. And as these two geeks before me showed you, I mean that in the most honoring of ways, that little baby's a human, fully human. And so I'm going to show you the next picture. This is our family. Now that's Noah today. In the middle, that's our 4-year-old son Jackson, who's here right now. Our 1-year-old son Cohen, my beautiful wife Abby, who's a pediatrician, and me. And so this is our family. And, you know, thank you. This is our family. But here's the problem. So what I'm here today to tell you a little bit about is a problem that because you love the cause of life, you probably already are aware of the problem. The problem is this, is that most people that find out they're going to have a Noah, their family picture doesn't look like this. For most people that find out prenatally that their child is going to be born with Down syndrome, about 67% of those families choose to abort their child. And so there's different numbers floating around. You might have heard the 90-some-odd%, but we're talking specifically about women who choose prenatal testing, find out those results. 67% choose to abort their child. In fact, you might have even heard a news story that was going around lately that talked about a country that said they were going to eradicate Down syndrome. And here's what you need to know about that. I'm all for eradicating cancer, eradicating the flu, eradicating the cold. But when we talk about eradicating Down syndrome, we're not talking about eradicating a disease. We're talking about eradicating an entire people group, like my son and his friends. And so what I'm here today to talk to you about is not eradicating cancer. Please, let's cure cancer. I hope these people and their best friends who are probably geeks, they can eradicate cancer. But what I want to do is not eradicate and terminate an entire group of people like my son. And so 67% of people choose to do that. This is my friend Cece. Cece, her mom and dad live just right down the street in Virginia. When they found out that their daughter was going to be born with Down syndrome, their doctor, their medical doctor, tried to pressure them, tried to mention multiple times about aborting their child in the womb. There was one appointment where this mother was in the office with her OBGYN. Her husband wasn't there. The doctor cornered her in the office without her husband and said, "Are you sure you really want to do this?" She said, "I do." The doctor went on to say, "I have a staff member who is very Catholic, and she even aborted her child that potentially had Down syndrome." This woman changed OBGYNs. Cece's a happy little girl. I was recently in New York City. I met this family. This family here, when they found out, when their doctor called them, their medical professional who took that Hippocratic oath called them to let them know their child might likely be born with Down syndrome, on that same phone call offered to make an appointment to abort that child. A medical professional. Now, there are lots of really great medical professionals. My wife is one of them. These folks are several of them. But there are doctors out there. These are folks that we trust. These are folks that took an oath to help us, that say, "Hey, you just had a baby. You have a baby in your womb. I can help you terminate that child," simply because they have 3 copies of their 21st chromosome. And so here's really 2 problems. The problems are that most medical professionals do not receive training in medical school on how to deliver a Down syndrome diagnosis with hope, accurate resources. And most OBGYNs don't have a personal relationship with anyone with Down syndrome. So you got these really incredible medical professionals, incredibly trained, incredibly smart, and I really even believe at their heart that they don't mean anything really negative by this, but no one has ever come alongside them and said to them, "Hey, let me tell you what life is like raising a child with Down syndrome. Let me tell you the journey that we're on. Let me tell you," and I mean this because before we had Noah, Noah's 8, before we had Noah, we would go to maybe we might be in a place like this with folks like you, and someone would be up here saying, man, this is so great. I wouldn't change anything about this. And if I were in your seat, I'd go, man, that's just what you're supposed to say. That's just what you're supposed to say. It's like if you get cancer and you go, man, God has really blessed me with this. That's just what you're supposed to say. But let me just tell you, as a dad 8 years into this journey, I can tell you on the other side of the equation, it's true. Our son Noah has been one of the biggest blessings in our life. We wouldn't change one chromosome on him. Our life is better because of Noah. Other people's lives are better because of Noah. And I believe there's babies who are alive because of Noah. And so here's the deal. Here's the solution to this. Thank you. We believe personal relationships plus the medical community can result in saved lives. Personal relationships plus the medical community can result in saved lives. Because as my wife and I thought, how can we save the lives of these 67% of children? We said, well, look, a lot of these women, they go and their doctors or their friends, I say friends really in quotes, tell them, hey, you just go over to this abortion clinic. No one's going to know. You're not very far along in your pregnancy. You can try again. And you go, okay. And what you and I know is that woman will always know. We know that woman, just because she aborted her child, one, she's always going to be a mom to that child. Two, I know that God has the grace to forgive them. If they have made that choice, God loves them. He can take their story, redeem it, and use them. You know, because there are, maybe even in this room, people that have aborted their child. And you need to know if that's something that you've done, you're not too far removed from God's grace. You need to know that. God can forgive you and save you just like he can save a wretch like me. And so this is what we believe the solution is. We call it the Hope Advocate process. And so what we're trying to do is connect every OBGYN in America to a family raising a child with Down syndrome. We call these families Hope Advocates. So what will happen is a woman can come to our website, hopestory.org, enter some information in there, upload a picture of their child. They'll get this really cool Hope Kit in the mail. Inside this Hope Kit is a bunch of really amazing resources. One of those things is a Hope announcement. The Hope announcement is this card that has a picture of their child and some other really cool resources. They take it into their OBGYN. They're nicely designed. They just say, hey, I have a son named Noah. He's 8. Here's what he's been up to this year. I want to tell you how great our story has been this last year. And here's the cool thing. If you ever have a patient that has a child diagnosed with Down syndrome, here's my contact card with my number on it. I've been trained by Hope Story. I've got training resources. I'm available to talk to your patient 24 hours a day and be a friend in the community to that patient, so that if a woman gets that news, she's not alone. She can have a friend, the Smith family, right there in Dallas, Texas, to say, hey, you're not alone. My wife wants to meet you for coffee, to talk to you, to share our story of hope. Because here's the deal. When people are afraid, fear makes people do some really, really crazy things. And what we want to do is take the fear, replace it with hope. And when you can exchange fear for hope, really positive things can happen. And so we believe the Hope Advocate process has the ability to change the world. I want to show you a quick video, hopefully here, of how we think this process will work. I'm sure it's going to come up. Oh, no, there we go. It's coming up.
I mean, it's gonna be crazy. My life is gonna change. This was so amazing.
I wanted to go over some results from the testing that was done, and the prenatal test results came back with positive function. So can you turn around?
Abby. This is Sarah. We just found out our baby is going to have Down syndrome. Our doctor told us about Hope's story, and he mentioned that we could meet up so we could learn more about your experience and meet your family. We're really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. Well, listen, we think personal relationships have the ability to really save lives. And so if you're a woman here and you have an OBGYN, we'd love to connect with you. We'd love for you to share about Hope Story with your OBGYN. You can do it simply by going to hopestory.org, putting your email at the bottom there in the contact form. On your table, there's a little paper. It's actually right here. Text Hope Story to 33222. You'll get a link right back at you. You can sign up for our email list. We'd love to stay connected with you and help us, help families. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I want to meet Noah. That was incredible. And finally, last but not least, I'll introduce our fourth panelist, Christine Accurso. She was born in the infamous year of 1973, and she has been given numerous opportunities throughout her life to defend the truth of human life. She is currently the executive director of the Pro Women's Healthcare Center Consortium and the practice administrator at Morningstar OBGYN in Gilbert, Arizona. Previous to entering the world of healthcare, Christine was the executive director of First Way Pregnancy Center in Phoenix. She is married, and she and her husband, Aaron, have 3 teenage children. Christine, welcome up.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Catherine. I'm here to give another type of message of hope, and that is that healthcare centers in our country that offer excellent, holistic, comprehensive women's health care and practice medicine, knowing that life begins at conception, have finally begun to unite. A couple of years ago, several of us began a conversation on how this unification can happen. There's many healthcare providers in our country who offer excellent medicine, but often are unknown. Dr. John Burchowski, Dr. Clint Leonard, nurse practitioner Dee Dee Chisholm, many of us sat at the table and said, how can we work together? So this unification is now happening and beginning, not in a common name of each center or a rebranding in any way, but under healthcare standards. These standards are holistic and comprehensive. When compiling these standards, we look through one lens, and that is, what do women deserve? These standards speaks to the whole woman, body, mind, and spirit. The whole woman, her past and the wounds that she may have, the patient that sits in front of us today, and the woman she can and will become. There isn't really an existing category in the movement for this in our consciousness because it's brand new. So bear with me as we go through this. When a center meets all of these standards of care and has gone through the detailed certification process and every standard has been verified as being complied with, then they'll receive a PWHC, or a Pro Women's Healthcare Center, seal of approval that looks like this. Some of you in the room might remember the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, right? This is the seal that you'll look for excellent, life-affirming women's health care from now and into the future. So the Pro Women's Healthcare Center Consortium is a centers who unite under this seal, which is really uniting under these standards. These centers all over the country have different names, different missions. They remain autonomous, but they have the same exact goal, which is excellent women's health care. It could be an OBGYN practice, a fully medicalized pregnancy center, a hospital, or even a family practice. As long as these standards are met at the one center, they can be certified. So this seal represents excellence in women's health care. And when you see this seal, you will know that this center cares about and serves the whole woman. These standards are broken up into 5 sections, and on the center of your tables, you will see the standards. So if you can grab one of those now, I'm going to briefly share with you what those 5 sections are. The first section is the comprehensive section. On-site or nearby direct referrals to these standards are essential for the material, emotional, practical, or spiritual needs of every woman. The second section is the convenient section. Women need and deserve a place to go that is open often and not just a small block of hours. The third section goes into the compassionate side. As we know, many women who are pregnant sometimes find themselves in need of extra aid, and therefore every center is equipped to offer them that additional assistance. The fourth section is high quality. The certified centers are required to be in good standing with their local government, meet the necessary regulatory requirements for their facility, and have all of their medical professionals properly licensed. And the fifth section is the medical services. This long list of medical services that you see are offered in gynecology and obstetrics. The services really span from a woman's life, really from about the age of 9 to 99. And as you see by looking through that list, every standard supports human life beginning at day 1. As you know, in every industry, certification defines quality. So this new endeavor unites the centers, because this is important, because there's some confusion in our society of what excellent women's health care is and how to find it. Health care restores the body. It doesn't destroy it. This year's theme, unique from day 1, pro-life is pro-science, could not be timed any better. We need to uphold the clarity of science and the truth, the goodness, and the beautiful part of healthcare that women deserve, so everyone knows when life begins. The Consortium of Pro-Women's Healthcare Centers partners with women to provide comprehensive, convenient, compassionate, high-quality medical services and access to social services that empower women to care for their health. Healthcare is a partnership. Healthcare is a relationship. Please look for this seal of approval as we begin certifying centers around the country. The medical community, the medical community that practices in this way day in and day out are coming together. It is time to unite and identify where these centers are so we know where people can find us. We launched this consortium just under a year ago. We currently have 11 certified centers. Those are the green dots on the screen. 2 that are in the process of certification. Those are the yellow dots. And a list of 90 possibilities that we need to contact that have surfaced over this past year. We're growing, and we'd love to hear from you as to who should be on this list as well, since we just started. The medicine in the movement has finally begun to unify under excellent, holistic, comprehensive standards of care that women deserve and that medical professionals are willing and capable of offering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. We're now going to move to quick follow-up questions with our panelists now as we begin to conclude this panel event. First off, Dr. Prentice, for those of us who are not scientists, it can be intimidating, I think, to speak about the scientific reality as to when life begins. Can you provide for us just one sentence that we can memorize to answer the question, when does human life begin?
Catherine, let me give you the typical geek science answer. I'll give you 2.
There,
so you
I'll
get
accept
bonus
it.
points.
There we go.
But our friend at the Contend projects lean on that Carnegie stage, and so if you really want to get a quizzical look and open people up, say, life begins at Carnegie stage 1A. And they're going to go, What is that? Which opens up an opportunity for you to really share more in depth what the science is. The other phrase you might use is one that I kept repeating, if you notice, that you are a unique, genetically distinct human organism. Now, it's still kind of sciencey and so on, but let me alter that a little bit and personalize it. I am a unique, genetically distinct human organism that started at one cell. And when you personalize it, that also will help to draw people in. You can say, and you were a distinct, genetically distinct human organism at one cell. But I think you try and get them to sort of go, oh, let me think about that a little bit with those sort of sciencey phrases.
Thank you so much. That helps us who are not scientists to kind of feel more confident in speaking about this theme. Dr. Christie, I have a quick question for you. We recently saw Planned Parenthood appoint a new president, Dr. Leanna Wen, and she is a medical doctor and frequently touts her medical credentials. And she also recently stated that abortion is part of the core mission of Planned Parenthood. As a fellow female medical doctor here on the panel, can you respond to that? And what do you make of that message that Planned Parenthood is sending?
You know, is this on? Hello? Yeah? You know, I actually feel really sorry for Dr. Wen. I spend time feeling sorry for her because she was an emergency room physician. And an emergency room physician, you've all spent time in the emergency room. You know, people come in the stages of desperation. This is where you go when you need to have your life saved. And she's been sort of plucked out of that by Planned Parenthood, and she's being used to promote a non-life-affirming brand of medicine, which really is shameful. You know, as a doctor, I can tell you, I'll let you into the little doctor universe. Doctors who perform abortions, they're the lowest of the low. They're the bottom of the barrel. If you're performing abortions for a living, it's because you're not good enough to do anything else. Nothing else. So, you know, this poor Dr. Wen, she's being shamed, and she's being used terribly, and especially as a woman. As a woman, to me, like the greatest horror, besides the loss of life, which is so sad about abortion, the greatest horror to me about abortion that it has trained women to accept to be the murderers of their own children. And we have generations now of women and girls who have been trained to think this way. So to see a woman physician being put at the head of Planned Parenthood, it's so sad for her, truly.
Well, we're grateful that you're a doctor for life. Thank you, Dr. Christie. Rick, Rick, something that I think would be helpful for all of us here, just to kind of pick onto your insight, if one of us encounters someone who recently learned their baby in the womb is prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome, what should our response be to them? What should we say?
Yeah, good question. Because I think it's awkward, right? If your friend calls you and says, hey, we're pregnant, we just found out our baby's going to be born with Down syndrome, do you say congratulations? Do you say I'm sorry? It's an awkward thing. And it's okay to feel a little awkward about it. But let me just tell you, if anybody here knows anyone pregnant, the proper response is always congratulations, right? And so if you know someone, yeah, you can clap for that. But if you know someone that is pregnant with any baby, it's congratulations, and I think you follow it up with, hey, you're not alone. And I may not know all the answers. I may not have a child with Down syndrome. I may not have a child with another diagnosis, but I'm here for you, and we'll learn together. But so many people feel alone, isolated. They feel like no one understands them. And I think it's okay to say, hey, I don't understand everything you're going through, but you're not going to go through it alone. We're going to do this together, and I'm going to walk with you. And so be their friend. Don't just ask them one time, hey, how can I help? Stick with them. Be their friend through the whole pregnancy and after, and be beside them. Because when people feel alone, loneliness brings some really, can make people do some really crazy things too. And so you just want to be with them, walk with them.
Thank you for that. I know every life is worth celebrating. Thank you. Thank you. Christine, your organization is called Pro Women Healthcare Center. Can you expand a little bit on how your centers, which are life-affirming, are truly pro-woman.
Absolutely. I think that if you look at the standards, it obviously speaks to the whole woman. We demand, they really demand that the entire woman be served. So the whole woman, not just the physical, medical side of things, but the emotional and the practical, the spiritual, the spiritual actually does affect us. I don't think any doctor would agree to that, would disagree to that, excuse me. If you look at it as well, these clinics will never, ever be called a fake clinic because, again, the standards are what they say we do. We need to start defining ourselves on who we are and what we do and not what we don't do. And so when you see this gold seal, you'll know that it's truly a real center. And those medical professionals, everything about that center has to be licensed as well.
Thank you so much. Can we just give a big round of applause for these excellent panelists? They're so incredible. And I really encourage, follow their work online, see what they're doing. They are just leaders on the forefront in building up a culture of life. Thank you all for that.